Huge thank you to my wonderful patrons. What up, nerds? Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative and my very first dedicated review of 2025. My name is Leslie Smith, and the book that I am here to talk about today, you know, the tagline on the book description of this one starts with the most appropriate description of this book. And that one line says, "There's power in a book." And my goodness, you get distracted because you're picking this book up. You're probably like me because you've read several other or all of Grady Hendrix books and you're a huge fan of the author. You love his dark horror that's always got this humorous slant to it. So you pick it up, you read, there's power in the book, you look at the title, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, and you're starting to put together in your mind what this book's gonna be. So that first line, there's power in a book, witchcraft. You're thinking this is going to be a book about witchcraft, girls, wayward girls, whatever that means. And we know that Grady likes to put humor in his books. Even though it's dark horror, he somehow finds a way to slide in some comedic relief to kind of lighten the mood or lighten a scene. And there's definitely humor in this one, but the power that I believe this tagline really talks about being in the book is the message that this book carries. And I was so shocked when I got to the end of this book when I discovered what the core of this book was about and that Grady Hendrix wrote it. I was completely shocked. This is so outside of what I was expecting from this author in the very best of ways. I was 25% of the way through this one and I started telling people that I thought this was going to be my favorite Grady Hendrix book ever, and I was right. This is the first 5-star rating I have given to one of his books. I really hope he has more like this in his wheelhouse because I am all in. So let's dive into Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, which will be dropping today, January 14th, courtesy of Berkley Publishing. And on that note, I do want to take a quick minute to say thank you to NetGalley and Berkley Publishing for approving my request to read and review the digital art for this book. I was so happy to get my hands on it that I started reading it immediately. Now, before I get into the nitty gritty about Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, I do want to give a bit of a content warning for those of you that have a hard time reading books about teenage pregnancy or pregnancy in general. There are also some very graphic scenes regarding childbirth. I have not ever given birth to a child. I've never witnessed one personally, so I can't speak to the accuracy of these depictions, but they felt very visceral, very real. And if you are someone that has problems with those types of things, this might be one you want to stay away from. Although it is, like I said, it is a phenomenal message with this book. Maybe if you know about these things going in, that will help you be able to get through those scenes better. And if you need me to tell you what chapters those fall in, absolutely, I can do that for you. Just send me a little DM on any social media app that you use. I am the Nerdy Narrative there. Find me, send me a message, and I'll be happy to tell you what sections to avoid. So now let's talk about the book description. What is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls about? It is 1970. 15-year-old Fern arrives to Wellwood Home, which is this secretive home out in the sticks of Florida where unwed teenage mothers go to finish out their pregnancy in secret, give birth to their children. They're forced or coerced into signing away the rights to their children, and then they go home and pretend as if nothing ever happened. Their lives have no longer been ruined, and they're able to carry on with their daily lives. And where Hendrix did slide in some of his typical humor was that each of these girls' stories seemed to involve an aunt that they had to go take care of, or they traveled with, something along those lines. During their stay at Wellwood home, the girls are expected to do chores. They help clean the home, they help keep it running under the strict supervision of the owner of Wellwood home, Miss Wellwood herself. Even with all of the strict rules and the schedule, Fern still manages to make a few friends while in the home. Among those are Rose, who dreams of keeping her child. She has named her daughter Blossom, and she entertains the girls with all of the stories that she's going to leave the home with her daughter and all of the things that Rose and Blossom are going to do with their lives. There's also Xenia, whose hope and plan is to marry the father of her child once she's able to return home. And last but not least is Holly. Holly is the youngest girl currently at Wellwood home, who doesn't speak. She's very unkempt, but she has a stuffed dog named Precious Pup. I fell in love with this girl immediately. It did not matter that she didn't speak or take an active role. When I met her and she had that stuffed dog named Precious Pup that she would whisper to, that's what I call my babies. I call them my precious pups. And oh, that just stole my heart right away. And I immediately felt a connection with this girl right at the start. Grady Hendrix sucked me in with these girls, these characters. And I was just continued throughout the story to be overwhelmed with the emotional depth that he gave these girls. I'm going, Grady Hendrix? Grady Hendrix, is he really going to be able to pull off writing an entire book from the perspective of a unwed pregnant teenage girl? And he just absolutely knocked my socks off. I mean, I do have to clarify and say I've never given birth. I was not pregnant as a teenager. I was never abandoned by my parents to go and live among strangers for some traumatic event. I've never experienced anything like this to say I've lived through it and can speak from experience. As a reader, picking up a book to read and enjoy a story and to get slapped over the head with how well it was written, the message it delivered, and just shining a light on things that happened that I was not aware of. Oh my gosh, y'all. This is the first book of Grady Hendrix that I have read that he got me at the very beginning and he never let go. All of the other books that I've read by him so far, it took me about 30% of the way through before I really got pulled into the story. Everything changes in this book when the girls meet a librarian of a traveling bookmobile that comes to Wellwood home every 2 weeks so that girls are allowed to check out books. The moment that everything changed irrevocably was when the librarian introduces Fern to a book on witchcraft, giving the girls a taste of power. There are so many reasons why I gave this book 5 stars. I loved the message. I loved the plot. Knowing the title of the book, and when I got to that pivotal moment when the librarian put that book in Fern's hands, I thought, okay, I know how this is going to go. I thought I was predicting how it was going to go, and I was wrong and right at the same time. Love that. I loved the writing. The writing of this one is one of the top tier elements of this book. It was amazing. I just loved it. The character driven, just the strength of these characters. I cried. I had my heart absolutely broken. I was so sucked in that I just could not put this book down at times. It was so difficult to read through some of these things, some of the traumatic stories of these girls' past, how they ended up in this home. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure, when you're thinking about a home full of unwed teenagers that are pregnant, you know that a lot of these girls are not in that home because they chose to have sex with their boyfriend. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, that's probably another thing I should have mentioned at the front of the video if you have trouble reading about that. Now, it does not go into graphic detail about all of them. There is one that is explained. There's a reason why, there is a purpose to it, and it's not for any type of, what's that? It's not gratuitous at all. the impact. These are characters that are going to stick with you well after you have finished reading it. In fact, I sat there last night. I finished last night. I could not go to bed until I finished this book. And I just sat there shocked. I could not even form a thought after I finished the book. It was just beautiful. That's the only word I could think of, is that was beautiful. Something I never thought I would say about a Grady Hendrix book. So this is so surprising to me to be sitting here just gushing over Hendrix. The plot, the characters, the writing style, the intrigue. I mean, I honestly, I can't think of anything bad to say about this book. And if you have seen any of my reviews about the other Grady Hendrix books I've read, you know I always have something that I'm nitpicking about this author. But this book was perfection for me. Now remember, I am one who thinks that reading is subjective to the person reading the book. I'm just sharing my personal experience with you so that if we're kind of aligned in our reading tastes, then you'll know this is one I want to read, or hopefully even if our reading tastes don't align, I'm able to give you enough information that you can determine, yes, this is a book that's going to work for me or not. The main reason that I wanted to read this book was because of the title. Of course, it was the author that got my attention to it. Even though I've had some problems with some of the books I've read by Grady, I still want to read more of his stuff because he really won me over with How to Sell a Haunted House. So anything he comes out with, I want to pick it up. So initially it was the author that drew my attention, but then it was the title. I didn't even read the description. Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. Had no idea what it was going to be about. I just knew it had witchcraft in the title. I was all in. I love reading stories about the occult and witchcraft. I'm telling y'all, the setup for this one was just absolute perfection. Just showing me how vulnerable these girls were. They had no adults to provide guidance, to answer questions about the things that were happening to their bodies during this pregnancy, how they started feeling about their babies, and how the adults running the home would talk about their babies, and just the emotional manipulation that was happening. So these girls were in a very, very vulnerable state. And what happens when you're in a vulnerable state and someone steps in and says, I can give you power? Hendrix just perfectly showed the consequences of depriving characters of any support or help from the adults who are supposed to protect them. For the setting for this one, I am a little bit partial. It takes place in Florida in the 1970s. Hendrix, once again, really shone in this area, at least he did in my opinion. He was referencing TV shows that were on at the time, the famous actors and actresses of the time that the girls would gossip about, just the activities that the girls did. I really felt he just did such a great job, not only in his writing, but in his descriptive writing as well, putting me there. Now, I live in Florida. Y'all, it is hot as hell down here. Boy, I tell you, the way he described these poor girls, these girls are so pregnant. Many of them are very pregnant. And to live in Florida in August, no air conditioning, it was just absolutely miserable. And he also described, I don't want to get too far into it, but just what happens when you go outside in Florida. Grady Hendrix, you did great there. Oh my goodness. I tell y'all, there was times I was reading this book and I started sweating just reading about it because I know what it feels like. I know Grady Hendrix has been successful in selling the rights to a lot of his previous novels. This is one that I hope he's able to sell as well. There were some descriptions of scenes later in the book that just felt like I was reading a screenplay. I could hear these actions. I could visualize the things as they were happening. He just, again, such descriptive writing. I mean, I was in this story. I felt like I was living in this house in hot as hell 1970s Florida, watching this go on, and just, oh man, I just felt so helpless. I wanted to shelter these girls. I wanted to protect these girls. I wanted to tell them that they had choice. It was, y'all. I've said all I can say. This book is amazing. If this is one that attracted your interest, I hope that I've been able to go ahead and swing that over to this one is definitely going on to my TBR. I don't think you'll regret it. Just again, be careful about those things I mentioned. Teenage pregnancy, graphic childbirth, miscarriage. That's an important one that I forgot. And just some traumatic childhood things that happened to these girls. So good. I'll leave you with a quote from one of the characters, one of the main characters. I say a quote, loosely quoted because I did read the uncorrected digital version of the advanced reader copy. This quote could be taken out, which I hope it's not because it was so good, or it could be changed a little bit in the final printing. But the quote is from Fern, and she said, "I did an evil thing to be put in here, and I'm going to have to do an evil thing to get out." Y'all, pick it up today. It's available anywhere books are sold. As far as formats available, you can get it in hardback, you can get it in digital. There is an audiobook. The narrators, let me see, I have them written down somewhere here, are Leslie Howard, Hillary Huber, and Sarah Morrissey. I did not listen to the audiobook, so I can't speak to how good they did, but I hope they did an amazing job. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the review. If by chance this is the first time you have heard of Grady Hendrix, I'm going to put a link to his website down in the description box below so you can check out not only this book, but several other of his books that he has written. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks again to all of the Nerdy Narrative patrons, with a special shout out to my top tier, the Nerds Radiant. Chad, John, Gail, Amanda, Star, Tara, Anne, Andrew, Kate, Ev, and Wilbur.